Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain, Randy Wright speaking, and as always, I'm joined on our state-of-the-art radio program by my first officer, Jeremy Graventon. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while Jeremy and I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before we may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, one of the interesting things that we can take away from what's happening in the election cycle right now is that if you go back to the New Hampshire debate, the forgotten issue is Trump's inability to define conservatism. Remember, he was asked to define it on separate occasions. And I found it very laughable that the definition that he gave is to conserve something. That may sound appropriate on the surface. That may sound like the definition that should apply to conservatism. But those of us who are in the know, which, as we all know, includes you, our cherished listening passengers and audience, we know that with respect to the arena of American politics, there is more to the definition of conservatism than to merely conserve something. Jeremy, I think this is part of another alarming trend that we see with respect to the New York billionaire businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian. And it's that he doesn't really speak well. He speaks to just simple, shallow, hollow, meaningless platitudes. And that's part of the problem with modernity in politics, because we no longer discuss the more deeply rooted political nuances, the philosophical differences, and the policy differences, which will impact the nation as a whole.
Well, these platitudes, that he talks, it's all patterns. You speak to individuals in such a way or at the level of which they can comprehend how you're speaking. Mm-hmm. This is why he loves the poorly educated. If people pay attention to what he's really saying, number one, he has not mentioned any way on how he's going to achieve what he just says. I'm going to do this, this, and this. Now, how are you going to do it? Well, he won't divulge that, because if he does, he'll make a mess of it, and he'll lose followers because they won't be able to comprehend what he's saying. Mm-hmm. So, he doesn't speak in coherent sentences to begin with. He can't formulate and conjugate verbs. His grammar skills are very poor. I guess it's maybe, some psychological attachment to the poorly educated.
Well, just remember, his brain is very good. He saw it's big, reminding us of that. It's bigly good, yes.
It's bigly good.
What, are we going to now start calling big wheels, bigly wheels? I mean...
hey, you know what? That's kind of a marketable concept in a way.
Sell them at the Piggly Wiggly, yeah? I mean, we could make all sorts of, Dr. Seuss type rhymes here. But let's actually delve into what the true definition of conservatism is. And we'll go to the trusty Webster's Dictionary, which defines it as the belief in the value of established and traditional practices in politics and society. So when Trump was out there trying to say that it was merely to conserve something, he really didn't even get to the heart of the matter. He didn't discuss what it really meant to be a conservative. And I think part of the reason why he struggled to come up with anything, any coherent thing, other than the fact of the shortcoming of his grammatical skills and syntax and lexicon, as you mentioned there, Jeremy, is that he doesn't want to define it. Because if you start to define the term by what it really means, by standing by the traditional established practices in politics and society, we'll see that Donald Trump, for the vast majority of his adult life, never stood for these principles. In fact, he stood in stark opposition to them. You could call him a grotesque progressive, or a Fabian socialist, because those were the ideas that he espoused for time and memorial. And let's not forget that his father espoused those principles as well.
Sure. And, this is the whole thing. I'm a big believer on doing as I say and saying what I do. In other words, when I give my word for something, I try to the best of my ability to see it through to fruition. Donald Trump has given all of these promises to individuals, and I've asked the question before. We've asked it. How is he going to do this? Take the wall, for example. He said he's going to build a wall. He's going to build a wall, and he's going to have Mexico pay for it. How are you going to do that when, A, the Mexican government doesn't control the economy, the drug dealers,
the drug cartels,
the people movers and this and that.
Yeah, the coyotes and all of those various elements, yes.
They're the ones that actually control the economy. Now, why in the world would anybody, and drug cartels it's organized crime. It's a business. It is a business to them. They operate it like a business. They have it structured like a business, just like any other corporation would have.
Right.
Now, why would any business pay for something that's going to impede their business, causing them to lose money?
Well, and here's the other question that's the flip side to that token there, Jeremy, is how are we going to negotiate with criminal elements? Remember, Trump said everything's negotiable. He says he's the great negotiator, and that's what he's going to do. He's going to negotiate. He's going to make great deals. America will have great deals again. You just look at my hair. It's perfect. Well, that's the problem. You can't make deals with criminal organizations under the current penal statutes. And this is true in all 50 states. To engage in criminal contracts is a crime in and of itself. And by the way, any contract that is done for a criminal purpose is null and void ab initio, meaning null and void from the beginning. It's not binding. It cannot legally exist.
Not to mention the fact that these drug cartels, certain individuals in Congress, certain individuals in individual state legislatures, and even governors of states have said that they are nothing more than undeclared terrorists.
Right.
So even with them being terrorists, the United States has a policy: we do not negotiate with terrorists. So again, not everything is negotiable.
Right. And then when you take it to the next level, with respect to our fundamental and inalienable rights that have been endowed to us by our Creator, those cannot be negotiated. They're non-negotiable. Think about this. Why is it that for the longest time it was against the law to attempt to commit suicide? The reason being is you do not have the ability to waive your right to life. Right. You do not have that ability. No individual has that ability. The only way that can be taken away is if you are adjudicated to have taken away the right to life of another individual under due process. And that is the way that it has always been with respect to the natural law tenets that underpin our representative Republican form of government, which is embodied and epitomized by the Constitution.
Sure.
And that's one of those little hardly touched upon things with respect to the way our Constitution works, particularly speaking in education. The historical revisionists don't like to touch upon it because, again, it goes against the strain of their propagandistic message, which is all about divisiveness, the so-called identity politics that has just come to plague modern politics. And it's a dangerous thing. And it makes me wonder just what in the hell are they teaching in political science classes now? That Fabian socialism's wonderful? Well, it would make sense, seeing as Zygmunt Dobbs had warned about this going all the way back to the 1950s with Keynes at Harvard with respect to the schools of economics.
Sure. And, this also goes to the point, and just to solidify that, the whole debacle throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s with Jack Kevorkian. The right to die issue.
Didn't he run for an office in Michigan as late as 2008? I'm pretty sure he did.
I think he did. And I can't remember exactly what it was.
I don't know. I remember hearing ads for it when I was visiting Ave, which was up at Ann Arbor at that time. That was my law school, Ave Maria School of Law. Weird name for school, but it was a good school.
Yeah, and I believe Jeffrey Feiger, his attorney,
right,
ran for a political position too, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember. I don't know if it was for governor or mayor of Detroit or something, but you know what? If he would have run for the mayor of Flint, he probably would have got it.
Well,
just saying.
Plenty of water to go around for everybody, sure. I guess.
Absolutely.
But so if we take this to the next logical step, going back to the definition of conservatism, just to recap here, we said that it's the support or value of established and traditional practices in politics and society. Well, therefore, the next step is to say that American conservatism would therefore be defined as valuing the traditions and practices of the Constitution, meaning a belief in the adherence to the Constitution. And it's so amazing that this has been forgotten, that this is something that even some of the so-called establishment conservatives, which, that's a whole other can of worms, but they can't seem to define this. They can't seem to embrace it. They seem to be afraid to embrace what this actually is and represents. And I think that that's part of the frustration that we've seen being exuded by the people, and that's why some of the people have been flocking to Donald Trump. And certainly it's why more people that are of the constitutional bend would go to Ted Cruz, as he has always stood up to the corruption in Washington. He has always stood up to the establishment. But as you said, it's like they're trying to sew to the sleeve of constitutionalists this narrative of politician, this label of politician, as if that is some form of instant discreditment. And that's a problem, because that's a two-dimensional type of lack of cognitive dissonance, because they're trying to shut down the marketplace of ideas. This is what the Fabian socialists do.
Well, it falls right in line with it, and it's an actual tactic from, one of the principles of propaganda from Joseph Goebbels, labeling. Now, to set this, and I think we finally may have pierced the veil on as to how it came about that people started to embrace this blind fury of following Trump because they have a disdained hatred for politicians. Donald Trump came out and said, politicians have all lied to you. They've screwed you over. They've done this, this, and this. I'm not a politician. Now, he began the labeling with that. Okay. What it boils down to is people have, latched onto that, and they're saying, well, Ted Cruz is a politician because he has an R next to his name, and he has that moniker of senator being attached to it. That makes him a politician. And since he's a politician, he's evil. He's bad. He's corrupt. He's part of the establishment. He's this, he's that. Folks, that would be like somebody saying, you know what? Some Germans were Nazis and supported Hitler. Therefore, since if you're a German, you must be a Nazi as well. It's the same thing. Being a politician, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are an evil person. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have done wrong. There are good politicians. The problem is because they have that label of being a politician, and they have those monikers attached to them that solidify them as a politician, i.e. being an R or a D next to their name, along with whatever position they hold, senator, representative, governor, president, whatever the case is. So it's a blanket generalization that has come out of this for the labeling. So Trump supporters that are solely supporting Trump because they don't like the way the politicians have handled things, they're labeling all politicians as evil. That is disingenuous and that is hypocritical.
And yes, and the reason for that is if you stop and actually analyze what it is that Donald J. Trump has done, what he stands for and represents, he has been the one that has been funding all of the type of corruption that they hate. This goes back at least 35 to 40 years, ever since he first got his start in the family business, so to speak. And he has greased the palms of politicians. And now all of a sudden that means that he can sit there and say these most grotesque, most vile things, being the vulgarian that he is, and that he not be held accountable for it just because that's the cost of doing business. It's that sort of mentality that I think causes a lot of the strife and discontentment that we see plaguing the nation right now. And again, folks, today in Arizona, there was more violence at a Trump rally. You can't make this stuff up. There was more violence at a Trump rally, and as these protesters were already being removed in cuffs and then violently assaulted outside of the event, Trump was whining about his First Amendment rights being curtailed or abridged upon. Now, again, going off of this notion that American conservatism is defined by the principles of the Constitution and valuing and adhering to them, one would think that Donald would want to go out and clarify that, no, he didn't really mean that the protesters were violating his First Amendment rights because, first of all, the First Amendment protects against governmental encroachments and abridgments of the free expression of the popular sovereigns, not against private citizens. And secondly, there's this doctrine of the fighting words doctrine that the courts have recognized, that when you're inciting violence, First Amendment protections don't extend to such language.
Sure, because you are using your right of the First Amendment in order to either directly infringe upon another individual's rights or cause them to exercise their rights in defense of their rights.
Right.
In other words, you're committing a crime. When you commit a crime, you forego your rights that you exercise in order to commit that crime. It's like, yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. Perfectly acceptable to do so long as there is nobody injured or damaged from you doing that. If you go into a crowded movie theater and yell fire at the top of your lungs, if everybody just turns around, looks at you, laughs, or whatever, and then turns around and goes back to watching the movie, where's the crime that was committed? Because in order for a crime to have been committed, there has to be damages.
Right. And, it goes down to just this very base part of how our rights work. And that's, you have to be self-responsible. You have to accept accountability for the actions that you take. Absolutely. And therefore, if you yell fire in a crowded theater and that results in injuries or results in bodily harm, then yes, you will have to be held accountable for that. But that's why you have the adjudication process. So again, it's not so much the act itself, because if you remember, in criminal law, the basic definition of a crime requires that there be what is known as the actus reus, and that means the illegal or evil act, the mens rea, meaning the guilty mind, and it must coincide in time. And so
which creates the intent.
Right. And so that all works together. And therefore, again, when you look at the way that someone would exercise their First Amendment rights, the fighting words doctrine makes a whole hell of a lot of sense. And the reason that it does is because, remember what we have said going back for almost every episode that we've had. Your rights end where another popular sovereign's or individual sovereign's rights begins. That is the way that the natural order of things works. That is the way the natural law works, and that is a quintessential part of the American system. And so apparently Donald can't wrap his mind, his bigly brain around that, and is struggling with the way that our entire legal system and our fundamental and inalienable rights work.
Well, Donald, Mr. Chickenfoot himself, clucking Donald, he wants to have it both ways. He wants to have everything that he wants. He wants his cake and he wants to be able to eat it too. I'm sorry, but that just doesn't work. You might think you can. You might think that it's, very bigly of you to do this, bring other people into this and tell people, we're going to win. We're going to win big. No, we're going to win huge or bigly. No, it's going to be hugely that we win. What you're doing, clucking Don, is you are creating a sense of abandonment. I talked about this the other night. You labeled individuals as those who have abandoned their constituents, but what you are doing is far worse, because you are creating a perception of individuals to wrap their minds around, to where it is forcing them to abandon their principles. You are far more detrimental than a candidate who says, you know what? Yeah, I woke up this morning, I was going to do a couple of stump speeches and a couple of rallies, but I decided I'm just going to go to another state. If my constituents want to vote for me, so be it. That doesn't hold.
Why does that sound like somebody who's endorsed him?
I wonder why.
Yeah, me too. But the candidate that he's probably most afraid to run against is Comrade Colonel Sanders, since he's clucking Donald over there.
And folks, please don't take our lightheartedness and our quips and everything against him as us relaxing, because that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I'm gonna make another pledge right here, right now. And I believe Randy will jump on board with this. Whoever is elected president, if Hillary becomes president because Donald Trump gets the nomination, and she'll, rip off his bigly coif and mop the floor with him and then wring it out and make him drink it. She gets elected, you best be assured that we are going to hold her accountable for every single thing that she does. Are we going to be harder on her than we would on Donald Trump? No. Why? Because we know what to expect from her. We know how she is. The Democrats put their whole agenda right out there for everybody to see, right under their noses. And the problem is, a lot of people are too complacent to realize that. The best place to hide something is right under your nose.
Yeah.
And that's what the Democrats do. Okay. Now with Donald Trump, the clucking Don, are we going to be harder on him than Hillary? Absolutely. Why? Because he's made all these promises, but yet he has no way of maintaining or showing proof that he's going to keep them. Now, if Ted Cruz becomes the nominee and he beats Hillary Clinton, which he has more of a chance than anybody beating her, are we going to be harder on him than Trump and Hillary? Yes.
Because we expect a man of his word to stand up to his word. And, Cruz has shown that time and again throughout his history. His record indicates that. And, that's part of the problem with clucking Don, is that we don't have a political record to go off of. Everybody's so angry with a politician. But you know what the nice thing about a politician is? You have a voting record to go off of. And with respect to Donald, we have nothing other than his consistently inconsistent statements of this presidential election cycle, and then some of the grotesque things that he said over the past 30 years, which is also diametrically opposed to the positions he is allegedly holding now.
Well, I'm going to say this as well. I'm going to add this to it. See, the reason why we would hold Ted Cruz to a higher standard over Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton is, like you said, it's because he has given his word and he has lived up to giving his word with every action. But more so, Ted Cruz has what's known as a moral compass and an ethical barometer. Ted Cruz himself, I believe, would even admit this, that he would expect individuals like us, the popular sovereigns of this nation, to hold him accountable. Folks, that is called dignity. Something that Donald Trump probably can't even spell.
We know he struggles spelling on Twitter.
Sure.
That's for sure.
And, like smirt or whatever it is, but
SMRT, everyone.
Yeah. The point is, Ted Cruz has that dignity. He has that moral compass and ethical barometer, and he has that fluent working and understanding of the United States Constitution to know that it is his obligation, regardless what office he holds, regardless of what position he is in as a sovereign of the United States, he is willing to be held accountable for his actions. Donald Trump, not so much. He doesn't want to be held accountable.
Donald has never had to be in a position where he's had to work for it. What has Donald done? Donald has run a real estate company. He's run a bad steak company that's sold. He sold his steaks to the Sharper Image. That's a furniture store. Who wants to buy steaks from a furniture store? I've heard of marketing faux pas, but I think that one takes the top. That's like, okay, I want to go to an auto repair shop to buy a bouquet of flowers to send to my loved one. Really? That makes no sense. But that's the problem. There's this cognitive dissonance with the Donaldus. He just seems to think, oh, I can create these new markets and it's everybody else's money that I'm playing with. Yeah. It's like what he said with respect to universal health care. Remember, during that same New Hampshire debate, he said that we need to repeal and replace Obamacare. And he said that we just can't have people dying in the streets. But if we recall that with EMTALA and COBRA, these laws that have been on the books since the 1980s, these laws that went out and actually prevent emergency rooms from turning away people that are incapable of paying, that caused a lot of rural communities, hospitals to shut down. I'm thinking hospitals like King's Daughters out in Temple, or not Temple, Texas, but around Clifton, Texas. It had to shut down because it couldn't afford to keep going. So if anybody's dying in the street, it's because they choose to. And you see, this is Donald doubling down on this same type of radical extremist frothing at the mouth, left-wing arguments that we heard that were used to promote Obamacare in the first place. And, this ties into something that a friend of mine was saying today. She used an argument, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for her and for what she's accomplished. But she said that in this argument against me, it's if Trump manages to clinch the nomination, we must back him because he's better than Hillary. And if you don't, you're not conservative. But if we look at the definition of conservative above, we see that this isn't true. If conservatism in the United States is about adhering to the established principles of the Constitution, how is supporting someone who is against the Constitution, i.e., Trump saying, I love mandates, the individual mandate, which I don't care what the Supreme Court said, because John Roberts basically rewrote the law, something that he's not allowed to do, by the way. How is that conservative to support somebody like that? In short, it's not.
Well, and again, when you have somebody like Trump saying these things, it's nothing more than he's basically plagiarizing Mein Kampf, the Nazi Party platform, the Communist Manifesto, any speech that Hitler, Goebbels, Goring, Himmler, any of them, any speech. Right. And furthermore, let's take it a step further. With one of the 5 laws, there was only 5 laws that Hitler instituted and put into play as
Chancellor.
Chancellor of Germany, dictator of Germany. One of them is the Prevention of Disease of Progeny Act. And I may have that worded wrong, but it's basically national health care is what it is. Of which, by the way, folks, Romney Care is a plagiaristic version of it.
Yeah.
Hillary Care, under Bill Clinton's, reign of tyranny and terror, was a plagiarism of it. Obamacare is a plagiarism of it. So one can only see that with an individual who is, quacking like a duck, walking like a duck, ducking debates like a duck, and clucking like a chicken, any replacement that he would come up with would be nothing more but the same. Now, people are tired of the same. We're tired of the same. We're tired of the same. But that's what he's spoon feeding people. It's nothing more than the same. It's just brushed with a different flavor.
Well, it's like this argument that I've seen in a meme, and I know it's not a good point of fact to argue from a meme, but this is funny because it said, I'm angry. I'm angry at the government and what the government has done and the way that it's betrayed me time and again. I'm angry with everything, and therefore I'm going to support the guy that funded it. Really?
Yeah.
Really? What is that going to do for the nation? How is that going to reverse the problems that are facing us right now? Because the problems that are facing the United States of America right here and right now, as Jeremy and I have said, going back to our first episode, is the departure from the United States Constitution. The key, the solution to the problems that we have is to return all levels of government to strict adherence to our Constitution. Why? Because pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And to put this in Trump terms, Trumpy, so you can understand it, the Constitution is the bigliest of bigly laws, okay? You have to follow it because it's the bigliest of the bigly. Now, you see, it hires these good people that go in and work under it, and they have to work under it because it's the bigliest of bigly laws. And these people are supposed to be good, but then they get corrupted by bad, stupid people that have a lot of money and a bad haircut that can't understand the impact of the bigliest of the bigly laws. Okay, Donald, is that good enough? Do I need a different color crayon for you to understand this?
I'm guessing maybe if they had huge yellow, it would be perfect for clucking Don. Yeah, absolutely. Huge yellow.
Hey, yellow, it's a good color for him. I mean, since he's so brave and willing to go to the debates, he's not being yellow about that at all, is he?
No, it's just, again, and with the Constitution being the supreme law of the land, folks, again, remember the first three words of the Constitution: we the people. We the people, the supreme sovereigns and ultimate wielders of authority in this country. We ordained it and established it as the supreme law. We delegated authorities to individuals in order to make sure that it remained that way. And when these individuals take office, or when they try to take office to get elected to the office to where they can change it fundamentally, I might add, to violate it, we have a serious problem. And again, the solution, which I don't think any other voice bringing about, peeling back the layers of the onion of all the problems that this country has. I don't hear any of them offering up any solutions. I really don't.
Yeah. And then to go to the notion of the problem of saying it's conservative, that it's part of the heart of conservatism to just group behind whatever candidate has an R after their name. Let's take a look at some of Trump's past statements and positions. Because once again, as he has no political record, we cannot go by anything other than his past statements. So we start off with a 1990 Playboy magazine interview with the Donaldas. In it, he said that Gorbachev, the premier of the Soviet Party in the USSR, was weak because he wasn't firm enough in dealing with the rise of anti-communist sentiment in Russia. Now, keep in mind, folks, this was in the months leading up to the fall of the Soviet Union. And here's the guy that is supposed to be the front runner of the Republican Party, the party that has been about conservatism, the party that's been about less government and freedom. And he's sitting there saying that the problem with Gorbachev, who is continuing this Glasnost from Brezhnev, that was this reforming of the USSR, that was bad because he should have been a hardliner. Oh, but it gets even worse. Because if you look at what he said then and compare it to what he says now in 2016, praising Vladimir Putin for his tyrannical control of Russia, it comes down to this sort of thing. And one of the defenses I've heard is, yeah, of course he's got this totalitarian and authoritarian type thing going because, he's a business leader. Yes, business leaders may run their companies with a firm grip, but nations are a different matter entirely. People's lives or death aren't controlled by business, but dictators can and will exercise such power and control.
Sure. And, it reminds me of, the statements that Trump made about Tiananmen Square.
Oh, yes, I've got that in here, too.
It just flows right into that.
And by the way, that's from the same article, Jeremy. The same article from 1990 from Playboy.
How could anybody take an individual like, huge yellow clucking Don seriously when he promotes such antics? When he basically alludes to, well, they weren't tough enough.
Huh.
Really? Here we have dictators running roughshod over their citizens in these countries. And it's bad enough that they're a dictator, one. Number two, that people are dying because of their actions. But Clucking Don decides and alludes to, well, they're not being hard enough. So let me ask you a question, Mr. Yellow Clucking Don. You're not satisfied with the amount of death, destruction, violation of people's rights that are endowed to them by their creator. That is not bigly enough for you. It has to be hugely bigly for you, right? It's just not enough because
how many ly adverbs can we add?
Cluckingly Donaldly.
Pluckingly, cowardly, bigly, hugely, bigly, stupidly, moronically, Trumply, bad.
It's just it's ridiculous. It's coming to the point to where again, the Leviathan is almost completed its cycle of devouring itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
The question is, what are we the people going to do about it? It's very simple. When we have a fluent working understanding of our shared constitution, and we decide to implement that working fluent understanding of our shared constitution by exercising our rights in the legal fashion, in the way that it was designed for us to do by the framers and the founding fathers of this country, there is no political authority that can stop us. They just can't do it. we've seen it in past, again with history, it trying to be done to the American people. The British crown tried it not once, but twice.
War of 1812, yep.
1776 and 1812. And both times they lost.
Now, the important thing to remember is that in both times, we came very close to losing our liberty, to losing our independence. More than one occasion in the American Revolution. And then recall that during the War of 1812, they actually torched Washington, D.C. They torched the White House. They torched the Capitol building. They torched everything. And it's kind of interesting because one of the things that stopped the British was a freak tornado. Touched down. First of all, it put out all the fires. But where did the funnel cloud touch down? Right in the heart of the British camp. Right in the heart of the British camp. And isn't it amazing to just think about what are the odds of something like that happening? What are the odds of that? It's astronomical. And it once again speaks to the type of divine inspiration that is infused within this great experiment of this representative republic that our founding fathers handed to us. And it explains why we must not lose faith in what it is that we're standing for, what it is that we're trying to achieve, because the United States of America represents something that is greater than the sum of its parts. There is a more important message and representation of the United States, and that goes right down to the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution. Because we were the first nation to recognize that sovereignty really flows into the hearts of the people, flows from the people, because of their fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to them by nature's God.
Sure.
Now, you see, they don't teach that anymore. And you're not going to hear that from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, because, again, it goes against the propagandistic message that they are preaching.
Well, it doesn't fit their narrative. It would be like, changing their narrative would be like, having George Bernard Shaw write Dr. Seuss books. It just wouldn't make sense. So to them, it doesn't make sense because they are a one-track mind populist entity. They want to have, this whole thing. And it's like you mentioned before, regarding, what happens to the nail that sticks up, it gets hammered down.
Yeah, that Chinese proverb.
Yes. So, again, it's up to we the people. We are the true sovereigns and the ultimate wielders of authority in this country. And it's just as you said, it's bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, it's bigly big.
It's bigly big. And, taking on to that, we're glad our listeners that have decided to join us, on this special live broadcast. Those of you that are joining us tonight, listening in right now, thank you. We want to thank you for standing with us, for joining with us and making America smart again. Forget all this nonsense about making America great again. America has never ceased in being great. It has never stopped being great. It never will stop being great because of individuals like you. Because it is
right,
you,
folks. We do this for you. We do this for you because we want you to be empowered. Because when you think about it, what is it that empowers the United States of America? What is it that makes this country great? It is the people. And the people having the power that is represented in our shared Constitution. It's why we say that one of the most important things for all of us to have is a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution and also our fundamental rights. And that's just a quintessential part of Americana. It just is.
Well, and it's only a small part of the ultimate solution. And see, here's the thing. Again, all these other talk shows, they're great. They're I thank them all for bringing to light certain issues that are plaguing this country. But again, it leaves us wanting more. We want solutions. We have to have solutions. Why? Because that's how we operate. That is what it is to be ingrained as a sovereign citizen of the United States. Now, here's the solution, folks, and it's very simplistic, very small, very simplistic, but it's bigly in its own right.
Smally bigly.
Smally bigly. The solution is we the people. That's it. We the people. And again, a very small part of that solution is having an understanding and fluent working knowledge of our shared United States Constitution. Another small part of it is individuals coming to the realization that A, they are responsible for their own actions and nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
B, having the willingness and understanding and wherewithal to accept that responsibility. Because then, part C, and only then, can we hold others accountable, those that are running for office, those that are holding office, and those that have held office in the past. There's the solution.
Right. And you see, it will also help allow you to spot those that are the charlatans, the carnival barkers that are trying to convince you that they are something which they truly are not.
The P.T. Barnums.
Yes. And so that will come back right now to Trump's praise not ending with the communist Chinese. Now, doesn't that surprise you, Jeremy? He had more praise for communist regimes in the same Playboy article because he was on a dictator, hotspot there. He praised the North Korean dictatorship. Yeah, dictator hotspot in a Playboy magazine. Oh, folks, it's just blinding the mind's eye. Anyway,
follicle frenzy.
Oh, boy. Anyway, he praised how then young Kim Jong-il, now dead Kim Jong-il, supposedly stood up to the tough communist generals to, secure his grip on power. Well, here's the thing. That's patently absurd. Korean history has a long tradition of fierce loyalty to an established dynasty. Unlike China, Korea lacked the so-called hydraulic system of government. Now, what exactly is that? That's where they had this mandate of heaven that said that the emperor could rule because God said the emperor could. Not our God, but God meaning their loose interpretation of a pantheon said that he could. But if there were things like a meteorite in the sky, flood, famine, death, mayhem, then he lost the mandate of heaven. It's like the damming of water. If the dam breaks, the water flows, sweeping away the current government and requiring that a new one be brought in. And that is what the Chinese called the hydraulic system of government. Well, Korea didn't have that. Korea was much more dynastic in its approach, which is funny to say because China had a lot of dynasties. Japan, on the other hand, only had one dynasty. They've had one continuous emperor, but that's because he hasn't had any power, really. It was always the shogun, which roughly translates to barbarian subduing general. I love that. That's such a short and easy title. But with the Koreans, it was always this devotion to a dynasty. Well, if you look at the Kims, for lack of a better term, they are a dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
You have Kim Il-sung, Kim Il-jung, Kim Jong-il, now Kim Il-sung. So we are going down these lines, and of course the generals are going to sit there and follow the dynasty. Where else are they going to go? Where else are they going to go? Technically, the Korean War is not over. We just have a ceasefire. The 38th parallel is the line of demarcation, but it doesn't mean that the war is over. And so they need a leader. The generals themselves just can't go in and take it because they don't have the same kind of tall hair that the Kims do. And maybe that's why he was also praising him. The haircut, the bad haircut, that's got to be part of it. Because that's bigly, hugely part of, Donald Smalley Handsies.
Yes.
It's just part of it.
Well, it's, what is it? You mentioned bad haircuts. What is it about bad haircuts and dictators?
I don't know.
I mean, it's one of those things, again, follicle frenzy, whatever. But
the only one that didn't really have a bad haircut was Joseph Stalin, but that's because he made up for it with his bad mustache.
Yeah. Well, Hitler, had both.
Yeah. Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Quoth. It's just got to go that way.
Ein Stash.
Yeah, ein Stash. Boy, we best be careful, or else the Trump Stapo will come grab us here. But you look at how he had all of these praises for the past dictatorships, and I'm sure, like my friend who sat there and said that this was out of context, taken out of context. Looking at this stuff in the past is irrelevant. It's 25 years ago. Well, again, why does that matter? It matters because when you look at what's happening in North Korea right now, we have all of this talk about the nuclear weapons that North Korea has, and we have Donald saying that we need to deal with that. Of course, he didn't elaborate on what that means, and that's from his policy positions. I think you can find that on issues or on the issue.org. So he's saying we need to deal with North Korea. How? Deal how? Business deal?
You build a wall.
Are we going to go play a game of pachinko with them? I mean, this is the problem.
Build a wall.
This is the problem when you have harebrained platitudes and not real policy. This is the problem when you have somebody who is, dare I say it, not a politician trying to do a politician's job. Because we have no idea what he's saying. He's just creating mayhem, anarchy, and chaos. Folks, this is why populism doesn't work. It just does not work.
Could we actually label this as, remember the Hudsucker proxy? Could we call this the Trump sucker proxy?
Yeah.
I think we can. And see what's he going to do? Let's take another statement by Trump. He says, I come out, I talk about the issues, I do this and that, people are jeering and, booing and this and that. And then he says, miraculously, or however it is, I mentioned I'm going to build a wall and the place goes nuts. So is that going to be his answer to every single issue? We're going to beat ISIS. Sarah Palin's going to be there on the front line with a shovel and sandbags, and we're going to, obliterate ISIS because we're going to build a wall. Or we're going to take care of Iran and their nuclear arms deal and all this other stuff because we're going to, find their nuclear facilities and we're going to wall them in. We're going to build a wall around them. Is it me, or can't nuclear missiles pierce through walls as they, kind of do in silos? It just it has to be.
Oh, it just builds a wall, not a roof.
Yeah, not a roof. Just a wall, not a roof. So it's got to be a very bigly wall. A very bigly wall.
Oh God! But speaking of walls, the Chinese know a thing or two about walls. The Great Wall can be seen from space. If he's going to be starting a tariff war, a trade war with China, and he's wanting to rein in or deal with North Korea, how are we going to do that when he started a tariff war with them, a trade war with China, the one that he's already even come out and admitted that, yes, they are the only ones that have influence over Little Kim, the dictator. Are they going to be willing to help us if we, I don't know, start a trade war with them? I don't think so. They're not going to be willing to help us. They're not going to rein him in. And then if all of a sudden Little Kim feels provoked enough, being a bad quaff himself, sending his men across the 38th parallel, we're then treaty bound to go in and help. So what are we going to do? Are we going to deal with them? Are we going to play pachinko with them? Are we going to have a pornographic casino built in North Korea and call it Trump Tower again? I don't see how this policy is going to work. And that's the thing. He is consistently inconsistent, and particularly with respect to foreign policy. And this is just going to put America in an even more precarious position than she already faces currently.
Well, no, what he's going to do is, comb through his,
what, drop dandruff on him? Great.
He's going to comb through his, treasure chest of, ideas and bigly things. And he's going to reach down deep and pull out the one thing that he holds value on the most. And that is the statement that he says, if I tell somebody to do it, they're going to do it.
Yeah, but why would they do it? You see, again, this is always the refute for Trump. It's the who, how, what, when, why.
Well, he doesn't have any of those.
Of course
All he has is, again, if I tell them to do it, they'll do it. I've done it before. I've walked in. I'm big. I'm a winner. I've told people I'm a winner.
So it's the schoolyard bully mentality. Great.
Sure.
That's going to work great. Yeah. And he's going to create a new currency, a lock of Trump's hair. Oh, that's got to be worth something. It's gold, right?
Goldilocks. Goldie Trump. There we go. Goldie Trump. I mean, it is the schoolyard bully mentality, but it's just a matter of time before someone punches that schoolyard bully in the nose, figuratively speaking. And
it'd be bigly huge.
It'd be bigly huge, hugely bigly huge. And that schoolyard bully decides that they have to find somebody to hide behind to do their bidding for them. Wasn't Hitler a schoolyard bully of sorts, and then decided to hide behind Rommel and his military and his Gestapo, his Waffen, the
whole Wehrmacht.
Yes, pretty much. And I could see that happening with Trump if by some miraculous way that he is elected as president, and the first time he's faced with something like North Korea saying, you know what, we have the ability to pretty much wipe Australia off the map, and since Australia is an ally of ours through a treaty, we are obligated to intervene.
Yeah, but idiots negotiated that. Idiots negotiated that, and I'll negotiate goodly. I'll negotiate goodly because I'm bigly smartly. I mean, really?
And people will see that I'm a greatly leader.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah, wonderfully.
Yeah. What is his obsession with ly adverbs? I don't understand that. Currently, the trend has been to sort of misuse language with respect to that, to chopping off the ly off of the adverb, but he does it the other way around. He creates new words like bigly just so that he can add the ly to it.
Well, it's very brainly of him.
Oh, and he's got a goodly brain. Just ask him. Actually, goodly used to be a word. A goodly amount of things. It used to be how they'd say things, but with respect to Trump and Putin, he sits there and he says, we got to deal with Putin. Putin doesn't respect the United States, but I can get along with him. You know what that reminds me of? And it's so funny because he sits there and he says Bush was evil for 9/11, all that crap. But it reminds me of the statement that Bush made about looking into the eyes of Putin and saying that he could tell he was a good man. It's like Trump sent out a couple of feeler hairs and it brushed against the shoulder, the clothed shoulder, the bare shoulders of Vladimir.
Yeah.
And he could tell that I can get along with him. He built a tower maybe at some point.
You know what else that reminds me of? With this whole issue with Iran and Obama. We can get along with them. We can settle this if we just sit across the table and talk about this and talk it out. See, this is a problem, folks. All Trump is doing is talking. It's all talk, no egg. Alligator mouth. That's all he is. He's an alligator mouth and a candy derriere. That's it. That's all he is. It's all talk and no action. You know who actually was talk and action in his first term? Ronald Reagan.
Huh?
Now, people want to say, well, Trump's the new Reagan. Trump is nothing like Reagan. Nothing like Reagan.
In fact, in 1987, he had a campaign to just attack Reagan, to say that he was a maniac from day one and that we needed to, deal with the Soviet Union because, I don't know. Even back then, he was consistently inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, folks. How can we unify behind that? Because if you're going to sit there and say that because Donald Trump just magically somehow manages to convince 1/3 of the party to vote for him, and if that would give him enough for the 1237 or however many delegates are needed to secure the nomination, that's still a tyranny of false unity. Because he is not representing our voices. And in fact, he's not representing the voices of about 65% of the voters. Because he's barely breaking 40%. Now, that is not speaking for the entire party. But to say that we have to support him no matter what, and to instantly turn our attention to Hillary Clinton just because it looks like he's going to be the nomination or the nominee, that's putting the cart in front of the horse. Oh, and by the way, there was an article about some of the violence that happened today. There was an animal rights activist that is a Trump supporter who was arrested for punching a police horse. I kid you not. She was arrested for punching a police horse. I think her punishment should be that they allow the police horse to kick the excrement out of her.
Sure. Yeah, that's just. But you know what they're going to say? Well, they only showed you what they wanted
The horse,
to see, and
the
this and that. The media is going to spin it, folks.
The horse, of course, was attempting to infringe upon Trump's First Amendment rights. I hear it now already.
Yeah, and I can hear it. Well, it's the media only putting their spin on it so that you only get, half of what happened. Well,
halfly truthfully, yeah.
Yeah, but who's the media in the tank for? Let's see. Who has garnered more airtime from the media than
3 times as much airtime as any other candidate for free.
For free. Well, he says, it's free because well, let's see. Isn't George Soros part of the media machine?
Of course.
I believe he is. And isn't George Soros also a business acquaintance of Donald Trump?
Funded his Trump Tower in Chicago.
Yes. The same Trump Tower that the occupants of and the employees of decided to
made it say no.
Make it Trump. Say no Trump by manipulating the lights. That's great. That's great. And see, folks, that's what we're talking about. That right there is the true sovereigns and ultimate wielders of authority standing up and saying, no, they are part of the true and new resistance. And you know what? We plan here at Radio Aviation Excellence of leading that new resistance. We want to be the new resistance. And you know what? We want you all to be a part of that.
And remember what the resistance did in Europe. One of the things they were tasked to do was to disrupt rail service.
Trump
You know, there's a Trump
train.
train. It's
Yep.
time to derail that sucker. Time to derail it.
Yes. And in doing so, we must remember we have to do it in accordance with the Constitution, because to do it any other way will come back on us all.
Sure.
It will be an adverse effect. And you know what, folks? It would make us all basically hypocritical. Things have to be done in accordance with the Constitution. We cannot exercise our rights to infringe upon theirs, even though there is a train, a dictator, speed rail, bullet train.
The Dictator Express.
Yes. It's running full force, but we have to make sure that it runs out of steam. And the only way we can do that is to do it legitimately.
And you do that by propping up the rails with truth.
Yes. Truth. Which has no agenda.
Right.
It has no agenda.
This brings me to something else Trump has said. Trump mentioned social Darwinism with respect to empires. He says, we must change to keep up with the times, yet fails to offer, again, any specifics. Firstly, the United States has never been an empire. That's adopting leftist code language. It's really annoying. Stop it.
We are a constitutional representative republic and nothing else.
Right. Secondly, some things, like our Constitution's principles, should never change. That's because they're non-negotiable. They're timeless by their natures. Why? Because they're part of the natural law. You see, again, folks, this just proves the point that Jeremy and I have reiterated time and again on this episode and past episodes of The Wright Flyer, which is that Donald Trump does not seem to comprehend what the natural law is, what it represents, what it entails, and how it applies. Because when you stop and think about it, the principles that underlie our entire constitutional system of government are timeless, meaning they're just as applicable today as they were 230 plus years ago, just as, God willing, they will be 230 plus years from now. And yes, that is a repeated statement that we have repeated on this program before. But it's because it is so important, and it's because people like the Donaldists don't understand it, that we run into the types of problems that we have now. And it's why he creates the dangerous sort of situation that we have by going out and promoting violence. Why? Because he doesn't actually understand how the First Amendment works, because that's part of the timeless nature of the natural law and the way that it operates. He wants to just make it seem as though everyone's out to oppress him. It's projection, folks. It is pure projection on the part of Donald, and it's because he knows he can't win in the marketplace of ideas. Funny that we say that. It's because he's bankrupt in his ideas, much like his companies went bankrupt 4 times or so.
Well, not only is he bankrupt, but I think it's just a matter of idea, or a matter of time before he generates this notion that, he wants to go on welfare in order to generate, a welfare system of ideas and principles. Now, follow me on this. In his mind, that would be bigly huge. It really would. And he would try to market it just like, selling steaks in a furniture shop. It's just, again,
Now, next to the motor oil aisle, you can get flowers and or Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Next to the motor oil aisle. Great.
Dr. W40 or whatever it is. It's just
Dr. W40's hairspray. Got it.
Yeah. And again, it boils down to the simple thing is Trump wants to have his cake and eat it too. And I say that because he doesn't care about how this country is going to pan out. He doesn't. He truly doesn't. He's
No, he
setting
cares
all the
about himself. That's it.
yeah, and see, he, he wants to be in control of things so that he can make sure that his quote unquote legacy not only stays intact, but actually flourishes and expands tenfold after he's president. Now, if that is his motivation, if that is his underlying agenda of why he wants to become president, what should that tell people?
That he's
If
corrupt.
he's corrupt. If he is doing that for himself, see, I would rather have somebody who is willing to be held accountable, who expects individuals and sovereigns to hold him accountable because of his actions and his words, and he is willing to be held accountable. Folks, money doesn't mean a damn thing. It means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. If you do not have your rights and you do not have a fluent working understanding of our shared constitution and those rights, if you are willing to forego that so that your lives are still complacent and your little boat that you're frothing around in the mud puddle murkiness of corruption isn't rocked, guess what, folks? We here at the Wright Flyer, we're going to capsize those boats. It's time that people man up, learn to either sink or swim. Because, again, the solution is we the people. All of these things we've talked about coming together, being wrapped up and embraced on that solution. We the people have the ultimate say. People say, oh, well, Trump's going to get elected. It's over. Guess what? Nothing is over until we the people say so.
And we haven't said so in this case. And that's the thing. They want to rush it through. They always do, because they want to take away our power. They want to take away our dignity. They want to take away our choice. But that's the thing, folks. It is not their position, nor is it their place, nor do they have the power to take that away from us. This is why I say that it is a tyranny of a false unity to say that we have to coalesce behind Trump. Why? The battle's not over. We have not won this position yet, and he has not won. And that's the thing. If the battle's not over yet, isn't it premature to start your victory dance? Isn't it premature to sit there and say that you need to focus on another enemy when you have a direct threat that's in front of you? If you think of it in the way of a fighter pilot, the way that the ace fighter pilots were in World War I and World War II and beyond, if you started focusing on the enemy that wasn't in front of you,
You're gonna
the
get
one
shot
that's
down.
on the distance, you're going to get shot down because you're not paying attention to your surroundings. You're not adapting to the situation as necessary. Hillary is there. She ain't going anywhere, folks. We will deal with her in good time. But that's the thing. It's not good time right now. We have not approached a point where we have decided the issue for the lifeblood of the party. And make no mistake about it, that if Donaldus goes up against Hillary, he's going to lose. And guess what, folks? This comes from the same number sources that predicted that he would do what he has done. It's predicting that he would rise as he did, plateau, and then not be able to do anything. It also predicts that Ted Cruz could beat her, and that Ted Cruz could beat him.
And again, with regard to Ted Cruz, he coming into this campaign and election season, in this cycle, he was the underdog. He was at the very bottom, and people, say, "Well, he's not going to do anything." This is the difference. Ted Cruz has been consistently rising in the polls, consistently garnering support. If you look at the charts of the beginning of the election and the favor that has been given to him and Trump and the number of votes and supporters that they've each gained, supposedly, if you look at Trump, he started off high. up around what, 47, 48% favorability.
Yeah.
He's dropped down to about 43%. He dropped down below 43%, but then he went back up to 43%, and he's leveled off. Ted Cruz has been at what? I think he started off at what? 4-6%?
Around there, yeah.
And now, where is he? Consistently holding the number 2 position.
Yeah, and now taking a lead in Utah in polling and bringing it in Arizona as well.
Again, he has been consistently rising out of all of this, proving people wrong. Again, even reaffirming this whole thing of the notion of I'll take the underdog. Guess what? I will take the underdog every single time, especially when that underdog is rooted in the fundamental tenets of natural law, is rooted in the constitutional principles that are based on the natural law system, and has a working and fluent understanding of our shared constitution, has kept every single word of action that he has done. Said he was going to do this, and he did it. Every single time. He has a proven track record of getting things done and doing things for whom? We the people. By working with we the people. When you have a base of individuals that are the root of everything that this country stands for, and when you go to bat for them and you defend them, what you are doing is you are restoring their morale, and you are building it up bigger than it has ever become before. And when that happens, when you rally the troops, when you have their morale, this is what Patton was so good at doing. Again, I have to quote Patton. The object of war or a battle is not for you to die for your country, but to make the poor bastard die for his.
Mm-hmm.
That is, if anything else comes close to being a morale booster, that takes the cake. I don't think anything else comes close to it. Doesn't hold a candle.
No, the only thing that comes close is when you have the leader standing out there with you.
Yes.
Marching along with you, which he did as well.
You want unity in this country. You want these things to come back and to reinvigorate the natural law tenets of the Constitution. What better way to have unity? See, unity, again, it all begins with we the people. Trump says, well, I've unified the party. I brought more people into the Republican Party to vote. Sure, in open primary states where people are not beholden of having to register for a certain party, so you have Democratic voters, lifelong Democratic voters, crossing over to vote for Trump because they're of the concept, because they're drinking their own brand of Kool-Aid and thinking that Donald Trump is going to be the weakest opponent. And you know what? They're right. They're actually correct in thinking that because, again, Trump lacks something that Hillary does not, and that is patience. Hillary is one of the most patient individuals. In fact, one of the core principles of Fabian socialism and Fabianism is having
to draw out and patience, because it's named after General Fabius, who was famous for drawing Hannibal further and further away from his supply lines and then using these incremental tactics to throw him off balance and to destroy him. And that's
attrition.
Yes, it's absolutely a battle of attrition. And Hillary has shown that she is capable of that. Think about this. She has been fomenting this desire to become president of the United States since she was sitting in the White House as the first lady. We're talking 20 plus years ago now.
And the thing is, and the proof to this, is really simplistic. She held one of the most powerful positions of authority in this country as a senator in the state of New York. She could have gotten votes as a senator every election, even after she was dead.
Well, no, then she'd vote for Senate.
Well, the point is she gave up that position to take a temporary position of Secretary of State. Why would she do that? Because she's patient. Because she knew if she took the position of Secretary of State, that would give her the ability to expand on her foreign policy, which she would bring right back in to her toolbox of patience to use to run as President of the United States. And I told people that she was going to run. I told people that she was going to run 7 years ago. I told them this. Oh, you're crazy. She doesn't have a chance, blah, 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 this and that. She's got too much baggage. Well, apparently that baggage has been misplaced by the TSA.
And when you stop, and by the way, that's funny that you mentioned the TSA, because some of the security guards for Trump have been TSA. I don't understand how that works. I just saw that in an article. I think it was around the same time that I saw the article of the lady, the Trump woman, punching a horse. What this all goes to show is that the 2016 election cycle has been one that has been against conventional wisdom. We can say that this has been an unorthodox campaign. We can say that what they were trying to do and accomplish has been unorthodox. They call him the Teflon Don. In a way, yes, but that's because the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media don't want it to stick to him yet. You see, the only candidate in the world who can lose to Hillary Clinton is the Donaldas. And that makes me wonder whether this was pre-planned. Because when you think about it, he had a phone call with Billy Bob Clinton just a month before he was running. Bubba, there sitting there, you know, I was out at the El Camino and I had the growing AstroTurf in the back, and that's where I was going to throw Linda Sue. But yeah, what says you want to run for president? All right, well, here's what you do. You're an adulterer like me. You just don't talk about it. You blame everybody else, and it'll be fine. I tell you what.
You know, and again, going back to this whole thing with patience, Donald Trump, the clucking Don, the Teflon nugget,
Beauty in the Quaff.
Beauty in the Quaff. He doesn't have any patience. He doesn't. He comes right out and starts off his rallies and speeches. You know, he'll start slow, and then it's hammer, 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 and then I'm going to build a wall, and everybody goes nuts. It's the same rhetoric over and over. It's the same speech pattern that he has picked up and adopted that Adolf Hitler has. Now, was Hitler a patient individual?
Yes.
Yes. More so than Trump ever even thought about being. But to emulate an individual, what's that phrase that saying, what impersonation is the sincerest form of flattery. So it's in a way he's impersonating Hitler. So he's actually flattering Hitler, even though he's dead, but he's still flattering him. He's flattering his image. And this is why I think it ties in with David Duke bringing up Trump is reinventing the image of Hitler. He's doing it with flattery. He's absolutely doing it with flattery. All because he lacks the patience. And another proof of why he does not have patience is he says all these things but never offers up cognitive reasons on how or when or what he's going to do. He has no, I'm going to build the wall. How? How are you going to achieve it? I'm going to make Mexico pay for it. Really? Guess what? You know, I said before that the only difference between Don Adolph Trumpolini and Whore of Babylon Hildebeest is that Hildebeest's pantsuits aren't made in Mexico. I have to
And her haircut's better.
Yeah. And I have to take that statement back because there is a striking difference. She's patient, he is not. That is the main difference between them. And that is what makes him defeated.
Ineffectual. It makes him ineffectual.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Sun Tzu has said, make your enemies perceive your patience as weakness. Well, that's exactly what Hillary has done.
Mm-hmm.
Trump views Hillary as weak because she doesn't act quick enough. She's not this, she's not that. But see, what is the true sense of it and the true perception of reality is that Trump doesn't have any patience, so therefore he is automatically weak.
Well, he shoots his mouth off too quickly. And, folks, this is why I say that it is a false unity.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a tyranny of a false unity to call us to fall behind this man who has espoused an ideology that has been diametrically opposed to the mentality and philosophy that we have followed here in the right. And so it's now that he's going to run that he just suddenly changes. Suddenly finds out that he's a conservative. What? After all these years, it just suddenly, abruptly, overnight happens? I'm sorry, folks. You don't change your political philosophy on the turn of a dime. It just does not work that way. That is not the way of human nature. And this is, again, why I say it is a tyranny of a false unity to say that we have to support him. The fat lady hasn't even started warming up to sing yet. So we have not come to the point now to where we should just admit defeat. We're not going to admit defeat. We're not going to give up. We will never give up. We will keep fighting because that is the nature and character of the American spirit. That is what made the American people as great as they are. And if you want to see America return to prosperity again, it's not that America ever stopped being great. America is still great. We still have our Constitution. We are still the people that we have always been. But we need to remove the chains and shackles of bondage to governmental tyranny. That is the problem. The government, via these unconstitutional agencies, via these unconstitutional regulations, have been strangling the life out of our industry, out of our people, out of our businesses, and that is what has led America astray. And I don't see Donaldus, Julius Caesar, Trumpolini promoting any type of solution that is practicable or real world. And with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I've been joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. To the passengers that we've had throughout this entire show, thank you so much for being there. We really do appreciate it. We couldn't do this without you folks. And with that said, I also invite you to leave questions, comments, concerns, either here at our YouTube page, our Google Plus page, or our Facebook page, or you can follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle of @RadioAviationX, which is basically all one word, @RadioAviationEX, @RadioAviationEX. And there you'll find our departure board that lists our personal accounts, that of Jeremy and yours truly, and our Cafe Press account. Take a look at some of the goodies there. Feel free to join our first class passengers by buying a little trinket or a drink or a drinking glass or hat or what have you with our logo on it or the first class passenger logo on it, and let everybody know that you've been enlightened by the Wright Flyer. We hope to see you next time, folks. Thank you again. Do take care.